Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma na Shuchati na Kamshati Sama Sarveshu Bhuteshu Matbhaktim Labhate Param. One who is transcendently situated at once realizes the supreme Brahman and becomes fully joyful. He never laments or desires to have anything. He's equally disposed towards every living entity. In that state, he attains pure devotional service unto me. The universe is happy hearing the verse, so some song comes. Srila Prabhupada's purport. To the impersonalist, achieving the Brahmabhuta stage, becoming one with the Absolute, is the last word. But for the personalist or pure devotee, one has to go still further to become.
What's the verse? Sorry.
Oh, this is verse 54 from the 18th chapter. The perfection of renunciation. But for the personalist or pure devotee, one has to go still further to become engaged in pure devotional service. This means that one who is engaged in pure devotional service to the Lord is already in a state of liberation called Brahma Bhuta, oneness with the Absolute. Without being one with the Supreme, the Absolute, one cannot render service unto him. In the Absolute conception, there is no difference between the served and the servitor. Yet the distinction is there in a higher spiritual sense. In the material concept of life, when one works for sense gratification, there is misery. But in the Absolute world, when one is engaged in pure devotional service, there is no misery. The devotee in Krishna consciousness has nothing for which to lament or desire. Since God is full, a living entity who is engaged in God's service in Krishna consciousness becomes also full in himself. He's just like a river, cleansed of all dirty water. Because a pure devotee has no thought other than Krishna, he's naturally always joyful. He does not lament for any material loss or aspire for gain, because he is full in the service of the Lord. He has no desire for material enjoyment, because he knows that every living entity is a fragmental part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, and therefore eternally a servant. He does not see in the material world someone is higher and someone is lower. Higher and lower positions are ephemeral. And ephemeral? What does that mean?
Temporary.
Okay. Yeah, they're temporary. So higher and lower positions are temporary, and a devotee has nothing to do with temporary, ephemeral appearances or disappearances. For him, a stone and gold are of equal value. This is the Brahmabhuta stage, and this stage is attained very easily by the pure devotee. In that stage of existence, the idea of becoming one with the Supreme Brahman and annihilating one's individuality becomes hellish. The idea of attaining a heavenly kingdom becomes phantasmagoria, and the senses are like serpents' teeth that are broken. As there is no fear of a serpent with broken teeth, there is no fear from the senses when they're automatically controlled. The world is miserable for the materially infected persons, but for a devotee, the entire world is as good as Vaikuntha or the spiritual sky. The highest personality in the material universe has no more significant than an ant for a devotee. Such a high stage can be achieved by the mercy of the Lord Chaitanya, who preached pure devotional service in this age. Om Jnanatimirandasya Gyananjanashakaya Chakshurunmitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Vidavadakanam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sarvagatam Sahagana Raghunathantam Tam Jivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishadavitanscha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namani Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pujayani Nirvishesha Shrivati Paschatade Shadalini Krishna Chaitanya Guru Gaurati Namaha. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jaganpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Takta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Panchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vyevata Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay, so I will come back to the verse while speaking, and for now just put it aside because I want to tell you a story, and the verse will come up again in the story. So the story has to do with Durvasa Muni and Ambarish Maharaj. I'll just maybe shortly explain in case someone hasn't heard of them. So Durvasa Muni is a sadhu. He is a renunciate. He has many disciples, and he's actually sometimes called the one who is difficult to live with because he gets angry quickly. But all of this is, of course, Krishna's Leela. So often when he gets angry and curses someone or something happens, that is because Krishna wants to teach us something by whatever happens after that. And then Ambarish Maharaj is a king, and he was a devotee of the Lord, very pious, and he's actually one of the examples that is given for the process of devotional service called Atma Nivedanam, which means like giving yourself Atma, just everything's dedicated to Krishna. And so this whole story that I will tell you, it's from this book called Sadhavo Hridayam Mayam, which means the devotees are my heart. So Krishna is saying this, devotees are my heart. It's a really great book. If you have not read it, it's from Shiva Ramswamy. There's also really beautiful pictures inside. And I just picked some nuggets so that we can kind of see what the Leela is about. And it starts out, well, maybe before, so the main reason of the story, or the point of the story, is that Durvasa is confused. He doesn't know what is the purpose of life. He thinks the purpose of life is knowledge, renunciation, and power. And for him also worth, like how valuable a person is, has to do with how powerful they are and how much they know. And Krishna wants him and us with him to learn that that's not the goal of life, power and knowledge and mystics, control, but that love is the goal of life, loving exchange, relationships. And then it gets even deeper than that Krishna and his devotees have a very special relationship, and that Krishna he does what his devotees want him to do because of the bond of love. And so I'll just get into it, and then you will hear more about it. So it all started with Maharaj Ambarish was fasting for Ekadashi, and then on the next day, on Dwadashi, he got guests. You can already guess, it was Durvasa Muni and his disciples. And so Ambarish Maharaj invited them to join him to eat something, to take some prasad and break fast. And Durvasa Muni said, okay, and I will just take a bath. I'll be back. And he took a bath and he chanted Gayatri, and he got so absorbed in the Gayatri that he forgot to come back. So he was sitting there and chanting, and Ambarish was sitting, waiting, and he knew that this auspicious muhurta for breaking the fast, it was slowly passing. So he was in like this caught between a rock and a hard place, they say. So he didn't know what to do. If I just eat now, I will frustrate my guest because, well, I said I would wait for him. But if I don't eat, then I will not break Ekadashi appropriately. So then he advised for some brahmanas, and they told him, drink a little bit of water, because that is eating and not eating. So then you ate because you broke your fast, but you didn't eat, so your guest shouldn't be upset. And so he did that, and Durvasa Muni, by his mysticism, he somehow saw that was happening, and he got really angry. He thought, this is such an offender. I have not come back. How can he disrespect me like this? This is impossible. He needs to be punished. He needs to be taught a lesson. So he created this like demonic figure and sent it towards Ambarish Maharaj, and it was supposed to actually kill him. That's quite intense, right? I mean, imagine that, to be killed because you drank a little bit of water. And then Krishna didn't like this, obviously. So he sent his Sudarshan chakra, which is a weapon Krishna has. It's like a disc. And so I think Prabhupada sometimes calls it like, it's even more powerful than the atom bomb. He says, so just so that we can get an idea of, just a very powerful thing. And the Sudarshan chakra protects Ambarish Maharaj and destroys that demon that Durvasa Muni created. And then the disc actually goes after Durvasa Muni. And Durvasa Muni got afraid. So he ran to the demigods, and he prayed, please protect me. See this weapon? This is somehow Vishnu's weapon. It's behind, like after me. Do something. You're powerful. You can help me. And they said, no, we cannot. This is Vishnu's weapon. This is beyond our power and our sphere of influence. We cannot help you. And so Durvasa Muni was even more scared, and so he ran to Narayan and came to Narayan and begged Narayan to help him with the chakra and said, please do something so that the chakra stops following me. And this is kind of the scene. This is now the scene of the whole conversation between Narayan and Durvasa Muni of this book. So Durvasa says, please help me, please protect me, you can protect everyone. And Narayan says, I cannot help you. I'm sorry, but if I'm not independent of my devotee, and you hurt my devotee, you offended my devotee by this curse that you sent to him to kill him, and I'm not independent of that. I cannot just decide. So he says, I can easily forgive an offense against me, but if someone hurts my devotee, I cannot just, you have to, this is between you and Ambarish Maharaj. I will not forgive you if he doesn't forgive you. It's kind of what Narayan says. And he says, although I am known as independent, I actually, by my will, become dependent on my devotees. And this dependency on my devotees is so absolute that my devotees completely control me, and that actually makes me happy. I enjoy that, being controlled by my devotees, just doing what they want. I actually also reveal my true nature when I serve my devotees. That's who I really am. I'm really a servant of my devotees. I love being loved. So just as Brahma and Shiva couldn't save you, I can also not save you. And Durvasa says, what? You cannot save me? No, I am dependent. But of whom? Well, I'm dependent on my devotees. What? You're dependent on your devotees? But come on, in the end, you can do what you want. You're God. Well, yes, but what I want is to be dependent on my devotees. The devotees are always thinking how they can serve me, and I just can't. I cannot do anything else but be dependent on them. I really enjoy this dependence. It nourishes me. It's my food. This dependence on my devotees. And Durvasa is really trying to understand this. So he looks it's like he's thinking hard. And then he asks, but why? Why do you and your devotees love each other so much? And Narayan thinks, my goodness, this poor soul, his heart has become so hard from all the renunciation and austerity that he cannot even understand love. That he's asking me, why do I love my devotees, and why do my devotees love me? And then he says out loud, well, because it's our nature. We taste the bliss of loving each other. The best of my powers is the Hladini Shakti, which means like pleasure potency. And when this pleasure potency is expressed, it takes on the form of love, prema, bhakti and prema. And when devotees love me, the love from their heart comes out. It goes into their service, and then it transforms the service into an expression of love. And in this way, love flows back and forth between us. And I am like a mouse that is hypnotized by a cobra when I'm looking at this loving service my devotees render. And that's why I'm dependent on them. And the Rasa he lifted his eyebrows. And he says, well, I can understand that you like big devotees, like Brahma, Shiva, Shukadev and Vyas. They serve you every day and they're universal administrators. They have such responsibilities. But why are you so interested in other devotees that have these low positions? And then Narayan interrupted him because he didn't want to hear this negative perspective on his devotees. And he said, well, because devotees like Ambarish, they're the servants of my servant. And to me, that's actually even better than direct service to me. And if someone is the servant of my servant, and that times 100, this last person in the row is not a less valuable devotee to me than the first person. And he says, actually, these people here, and like in the end, the servant of the servant of the servant, they sometimes have even more love. It's possible. And also, Narayan says, because the servant of the servant of the servant also is serving my devotees and is loving my devotees, I think that's even more valuable, because to me, Narayan says, it's more valuable to love my devotees than to love me. That's what I think, my perspective. And then he says, I will tell you some of my names, just so you understand me better. And he says, I am known as Bhakta Paradina, one who is controlled by devotees. Ashvatantra or Asvatantra, I don't know, not independent. Sadhumaya, dependent on devotees. Sadhu Grasta Manas, whose heart is wrapped in attention on devotees. Sadhu Priya, who loves his devotees as they love him. Sadhu Dan, who is charitable to devotees. Sadhu Chari, who always resides among his devotees. So who knows, maybe Krishna is here now? So many of you here. And Sadhu Chitta, in whose heart devotees reside. So those are all my names, Narayan says. And now suddenly Narayan, or Durvasa kind of realizes he's serious about this. Like he's not backing away from this point that he's not independent. And then he gets scared because he thinks, what will happen now? If he's not going to protect me and kind of step in for me, will the chakra just kill me? What will happen? So he just decides that he will ask some questions about the devotees, just to maybe try to live longer and maybe get some benefit. And actually while the conversation, now he starts asking some questions without taste, but then as he hears more and more, he also starts getting taste. So that's maybe similar to our own process, right? That we get more and more taste the longer we practice. So he just says, just to keep the conversation going so that the chakra doesn't kill him, he just says first, well, please explain. Has this noise always been here, or is it new?
Sometimes it comes.
Okay. Sounds like someone's cooking tea. Okay. So
Looks like
is it?
So the wireless mic is off?
yeah, it's off.
No, it's better, huh? Actually, I just turned it off and it's still doing.
I think it's so issue with speaker actually, not with mic.
Yeah. Okay. We can just continue, right? Yeah. Okay. So Durvasa says, so please explain this what you say, what is affection? Is affection between you and the devotees? So I just need to continue speaking, then it will also be quiet. And then Narayan says, well, the truth is, I cannot live without my devotees. I experience so much more happiness through my devotees than to myself. So I can enjoy everything that is good about me and my abode a lot better with my devotees. So you might know the same for your own life, right? It's much more nice to share happiness with others. And also your own happiness depends on the relationships you have, right? If something's in trouble with an important person in your life, you're also not that happy. So it's the same for Krishna and God. He also enjoys everything, his opulences, because he can have an loving exchange with his devotees. But Durvasa, it said Durvasa's heart has become hard by all the renunciation, and he just had empty eyes when he heard this. He didn't move him or didn't really touch him. And Narayan said, well, for me also something special is that my devotees are so merciful. They're always kind to everyone else, and whenever a devotee decides to be kind to someone, I also bless that person. Because if my devotee wants to be merciful, my mercy follows the mercy of my devotees. And because they're always so focused on others and also trying to help them and not just enjoying Krishna consciousness for themselves or whatever they have, I'm moved by this selfless service that they're trying to be kind to others. And now Durvasa felt a little embarrassed because his motives have been selfish so far. He didn't try to punish Ambarish as a service, but it was out of his own ego, right? And so Narayan says, can you now understand why I love my devotees? And why I'm not independent? And Durvasa now had the impression he was starting to understand a little bit. There was something mysterious between the Lord and his devotees. And then he says, well, but what about new devotees? Like, there are some devotees who are always with you since time immemorial, but what about new devotees? What about devotees that have just heard about you? Do you also love them? And he actually gives the example of Prahlad Maharaj it's Prahlad Maharaj. And he says, well, of course, the devotees that are always with me, like Lakshmi and Sankarshan, they're always situated in devotion since time immemorial, but new devotees actually have to go through quite some troubles to get to me. They're in the material world, and it's not easy to be a devotee in the material world. And that actually also, to me, that is heroic, how they are being a devotee in the material world. And so I love them just as much. Sometimes I even feel more for them. And then so Durvasa just tries to figure out, so there must be a devotee he doesn't like, he's just keeping question. The next question is, but what about a devotee who is really attached? Like has so many material attachments. You cannot tell me you love them just as much as the other devotees. And Narayan says, yes, of course. And I will help them actually. I will help them come to me. And there's also this Bhagavatam verse, having awakened faith in my narrations, in the narrations of my glories, being disgusted with all material activities, knowing that all sense gratification leads to misery, but still being unable to renounce all sense enjoyment, my devotee should remain happy and worship me with great faith and conviction. Even though he's sometimes engaged in sense enjoyment, my devotee knows that all the sense gratification leads to a miserable result, and he sincerely repents such activities. So he says, it's not a problem. Devotees doesn't have to be fully liberated to get my attention and love. And then Durvasa says, I'm becoming more and more embarrassed of my behavior. And if you think that I'm qualified, then please explain what you just said with devotion to you. What does this mean? And Narayan says, well, I have some good examples are Ambarish Maharaj and Bali Maharaj. They are the example of Atma Nivedana devotion. And they depend on me for everything in their life. And sometimes maybe people may speculate that I forget a devotee. that I, forgot you. Took care of everyone else, but I just was sleeping for a second, so, but that's not, Krishna says that's not possible. I don't forget, not a single devotee is forgotten by me. And also a devotee never stops worshipping me. So this is a Bhagavad Gita verse of these. This is 7:17. The one who is in full knowledge and always engaged in pure devotional service is the best. And actually, okay, for I am very dear to him and he's very dear to me. And the next one, this is Bhagavatam 2:8-6. A pure devotee of the Lord, whose heart has once been cleansed of the process of devotional service, never relinquishes the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. So they don't give me up either. For they fully satisfy him. The lotus feet of Krishna fully satisfy the devotee, as a traveler is satisfied at home after a troubled journey. And Durvasa now tries to kind of argument for his case. So he says, yes, but I'm also known as a Samadarshi. Can someone explain that one?
Sees equally. Sees everyone equally.
Right. So Sama means same and Darshi means seen, right? So he sees everyone the same. This is the verse that we read at the beginning, right? And then Narayan said, well, actually a real Samadarshi is more than you. Because a real Samadarshi, for him, the pain of someone else and the happiness of someone else is just as important as his own pain and happiness. And obviously for you, Ambarish's pain was not as important to you as your own satisfaction or pain. And so he asks, so a true liberated soul has empathy for everyone. That's the Brahma Buddha Prasanatma verse, where this sees everyone with the same eyes. I actually like this explanation. It actually really means that if someone else is suffering, I feel the same amount of pain than if I were suffering. And then he asks him, Durvasa, would you like to die because you drank water? Is that something you would enjoy? And he said, of course not. And he says, so why should Ambarish Maharaj have that fate? Right? If you don't want to experience it, why are you going to do it to someone else? And you didn't consider this because his pain is not as important to you as your own. But actually you're only busy thinking about your own enjoyment, and that's why you're not a real Samadarshi. When you have true devotion, you will be like Ambarish Maharaj. And so Durvasa slowly started to understand more and more. And the next question he asked, okay, I understood now that there's truly no devotee you don't like, that you really love all devotees, and there's no devotee you ignore and no devotee you forget. But how is it now that you come under the control of the devotee? And Narayan says, it's just my nature to be attached to love and to be attracted by love. Just like a flower attracts a bee, or a fire attracts a moth. That's how I'm attracted to love. It's just my nature. There's not much to explain, It's just my nature. I'm also called, that's why I'm called Rasa Vaisaha, the reservoir of transcendental moods. I am so intensely attracted to love that I am completely controlled by it immediately. And because this love lives in my devotees, they control me. Can you understand? And Durvasa says, I'm trying to. And then he says, how exactly do they do it? How do they do it that you follow their wishes? And he says, I am only controlled by love, and love you can only get from a devotee. So you can also become someone I am controlled by having association with my devotees. And Durvasa says, yeah, but who is qualified? Tell me honestly, who is qualified to bring God under their control? And then Narayan says, everyone. Each and every single person and living entity. We all have the qualification. Just think of my Braj Leela, the gopis, cows, bushes, animals, snakes. They've all gotten love to me through association with my devotees. And so how exactly do the devotees please you so that you then give yourself to them? And Narayan says, well, they hear about my leelas, and then they've developed some faith in me, and that brings them on the spiritual platform. Right? It's often said that faith is the most important thing. I don't think any of it is real, that Krishna doesn't exist. I'm not going to give much endeavor into Krishna consciousness. But if I have faith, Krishna is actually real, I will be super motivated, right? Yeah. So then he explains that if you have association with devotees, then you will make spiritual progress. And by serving devotees, you make spiritual progress. And now Durvasa is getting more embarrassed because he understood that instead of taking the opportunity of associating with Ambarish Maharaj and making spiritual progress, he actually offended him. So instead of serving him, he made his life hellish. And he thinks, I have to somehow correct this. It was not okay what I did. And then Narayan keeps speaking to him and says, I want to now tell you the most confidential thing. Are you all ready? For the most confidential thing? Sadhavo hridayam mayam. So this is Bhagavatam 9:4. Look, the devotees are my heart, and I am the heart of the devotees. Ambarish Maharaj is my heart, and by giving difficulties to his heart, you've also given difficulties to my heart. And Durvasa says, I'm so sorry, how horrible was my mistake? And Narayan says, well, pretty horrible. And then Durvasa falls down at his feet and says, please forgive me. And Narayan says, I cannot. I can, if you had done this to me, I can forgive you, but I cannot forgive you because you've hurt my devotee. So you have to correct this mistake with Ambarish Maharaj. And Durvasa says, yeah, but come on, Ambarish made a mistake, he needed to be punished. And Narayan says, well, you know what? I am the one who helps my devotees realize their mistakes. I destroy the ignorance in their heart with the shining torch of knowledge. So devotees actually, they act guided by my inspiration. So whatever Ambarish Maharaj is doing, it's all guided and inspired by me. And Durvasa says, but come on, what's more important? To respect the Brahmana or to follow Dvadashi? Narayan shook his head so much that his earrings, like the light that reflected in his earrings, was going into all directions. And he says, I don't know. Ask Ambarish Maharaj. I cannot tell you. Ask Ambarish Maharaj. He knows the principles of Dharma that even I do not know. And now really Durvasa Muni's jaw dropped. And Narayan says, everything that I know, I have learned from my devotees. My devotees are the embodiment of Dharma. So how am I supposed to explain it to you? I am their disciple. And Durvasa was completely confused now. But surely, Narayan, you must know the principles of Dharma. You're Narayan. And he says, well, the principles of Dharma, they all come from the principles of love and devotion. And their purpose is to support bhakti. And the experts in bhakti and service to me are my devotees, not me. I'm the one being served, so I don't know what they're doing and what their principles exactly are. Like, if you really want to know about it, you have to learn from my devotees. And And then Ravas asks, so what should I do now? And Narayan says, well, the first step is to understand that you made this horrible mistake. And as long as you have some resistance to understanding you made a mistake, any apology will not be sincere. And then you have to go to Ambarish Maharaj and ask him for forgiveness. And Durvasa bowed down, and his heart was burning with repentance, and he was crying. And in the first time on his spiritual journey, his heart was really melting, and he experienced symptoms of transcendental ecstasy. He was crying and shaking. And then the last thing Narayan says, I want to help you be more peaceful. I arranged that you shortly became this angry, and that you tried to send this demon to kill Ambarish. Actually, it was my inspiration or my arrangement so that we could have the learning of this Leela, so don't worry, you're okay. And then he was relieved and went to Ambarish Maharaj and asked for forgiveness and was forgiven, and the chakra stopped following him. So it's so very interesting, right? We learn that Krishna is controlled by his devotees, and that he enjoys this actually, and that to learn about devotion we have to learn from devotees, and that's also where we can get love for Krishna and the association of devotees. And there is no devotee that Krishna forgets or overlooks. And once a devotee has tasted Krishna's the taste of serving Krishna's feet, there is nothing else the devotee would want. Does anyone have any thoughts about this? Any questions? Any comments?
Yeah.
I think I saw Mahaman and Sid.
Hare Krishna, thank you for your wonderful, inspiring lecture. And I would like to know regarding the rasas. So with Narayan we can have only this Dasyam rasa serving, but it sounded for me like also very deep and intimate, and I'm thinking about, is it not just possible with Krishna, or maybe you can say something to this also?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. As we can learn from the Gaudiya Vaishnavacharyas, there's different relationships we can have with Krishna. We can have the relationship of a servant. So when Krishna wakes up in the morning, there are some servants who help him get dressed, for example, or who help him take a bath. That would be serving him as a servant. And then there's devotees who are his friends. He has some older boys, some younger boys, some boys that are the same age. They play with him the whole day. They tease him, they punch him, because they're his friends, right? There's no sense of you're God. And then he also has, this is the parental relationship. He has parents and also uncles and aunties. And then the last one is as a girlfriend, or this romantic relationship with Krishna, like Srimati Radharani and her friends. And so Mahaman was asking, so we always hear that there's these intimate relationships and this closeness is because Krishna he's not worshipped as God like in Vrindavan, right? Like he's just someone. They know he's special, but they don't like him because he's God. They like him because he's Krishna. And this awareness that God is more in other leelas, like with Narayan or Vishnu. And that's actually the main difference, that because Narayan also has a wife, for example, or a brother and friends. He also has servants. So I think that the other rasas are also there with Narayan. I'm thinking he must also have parents, but I don't know. Maybe he doesn't. But he has, Sankarshan is
It's
he a brother?
expansion, so
Expansion.
only actually Dasya is there.
Really?
Like all Vaikuntha only has like Shanta and Dasya, but not like Sakya all these are
Oh, that's
not
horrible.
not there.
Okay.
So that's why like Krishna is the Purna Purushottam.
But there are also other gods who you can have, like Ramchandra or
Yeah.
Nishingadev, right? They have also more
With
than
Nasya
Rasas.
Dev, of course, you cannot have friendship, so it's again Dasya. So
But Prahlad Maharaj,
he was like Vatsalya, like he was like looking like a Dasya plus Vatsalya, like this.
okay. Well, in any case, we can say that with Krishna we can have the most variety and intimate relationship.
Yeah.
Oh, and you were asking, but this does sound pretty intimate, and I think that's just because being Krishna's servant or Narayan's servant is also wonderful, right?
Mm.
If you want to hear more about this, you can read the Brihad Bhagavatamrita, in which so there's the hero of the story, Gopkumar. He goes through all the different abodes. He starts here, and he goes to Shiva Loka and Nishingadev's place, and also to Vaikuntha. And first, when he gets someplace, he's always like, "Wow, this is amazing here, Nishingadev," or wherever he is, he really likes it. But then after a while, he's like, "Oh, something's missing." Like for example, I think it was in Vaikuntha where he said, "The Lord sometimes goes away on a trip, and then he's not here, and I cannot have an exchange with him." So and then only when he gets to Vrindavan, there, and so you can kind of see how the variety builds and becomes more and more complete in Vrindavan. Did that kind of answer the question, or something left?
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Yes.
As we speak about this Krishna Prema is the highest love, and is there something like Narayan Prema, or because they don't have this different relationships with rasas, which is possible with Krishna, but it seems like also that this is very, very deep and very so. Do they have also Krishna Prema, or what? How is this love called? What they have? You explained so nice, and it was so touching. And do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's probably not called Krishna Prema because that means like love for Krishna. So I don't know if do you know the Sanskrit term for the love devotees feel to Narayan?
It's Dasya Bhav mostly.
I don't know how the terminology would go, but it is love.
Yeah, for example, like Mother Lakshmi, she is like massaging the feet of Narayan. So, she is expressing her love in, as a servant, basically. Or Jai Vijay, they are protecting the, Vaikuntha. So they are expressing as, protectors. So what I read from the books, so in Vaikuntha, so it is, everything is in awe and reverence, like Aishwarya Bhav, basically. And in Golok Vrindavan, it's Madhurya, like, more of a intimate, loving relationship. So that's the difference between Vaikuntha and Goloka. So that's why the Gaudiya Vaishnavism, so they always aspire for the Golok Vrindavan, not for the Vaikuntha. Even like if you give a devotee that, oh, you will go to Vaikuntha, so they will not take it because they want intimate relationship with Krishna. So the Vaikuntha is all about awe and reverence, like Aishwarya. So.
Yes, but as Mangala described, they have also very deep and intimate love.
So that is in like Dasya Bhav.
You can go on my blog and listen to the whole Brihad Bhagavatamrita. I think you will enjoy it. Because then you can really see the facets of love and how what can, like, we would think, but let's say a goal, like a soul comes to Vaikuntha, what could be missing? But then he always finds something. He's like, oh, and then only when he's with Krishna, he's like, now everything's good.
Maybe.
I think there were some more questions just because of time.
I know we have a lot of time because offering is not done.
Okay. So you wanted to say something?
Yeah, so I just remember one pastime from Chaitanya Charamrit. So basically, like there is discussion why the Mother Lakshmi is not allowed to enter in the Ras Leela of Krishna. So because like she doesn't want to leave her position as Aishwarya Bhav, and because she wants to enter in Ras Leela also, but she also doesn't want to leave the Aishwarya Bhav. So that's why Krishna doesn't allow her in the participating in the Ras Leela, but he gave her a position in her his chest as the golden mark. Basically, the line on the chest. So because the devotees who are in awe and reverence, so because based on the desire you will get the kingdom, basically. So it's like this.
What?
Based on the desire that you have, you will get the result. So if your desire is to go home back to Godhead, to Golok Vrindavan, you will go there. if you are worshipping in awe and reverence, you'll go to Vaikuntha. So it's like this. Or if you worship Lord Ram, you'll get to Saket Dham. So if someone worship like Nrsimha Dev, they will go to Nrsimha Vaikuntha basically. So it's like this.
Let's hear Sid's question.
Yeah, Mike.
That's all right. My question is, it was very interesting how you spoke how Lord Narayan, he himself doesn't know the full definition of Dharma, and that only his devotees know the definition of Dharma. And in addition to that, the fact that this stage of transcendental happiness, the transcendental platform, that love, can only come through devotees. And it made me think of the last line of that purport that we read, that this mercy only comes through Lord Chaitanya. Can you expand on that, please?
That's actually interesting, because that's also something that I kind of, because I didn't have time to tell the whole book, obviously, but that's also exactly a point in the book that Narayan says, because I sometimes want to also feel what it is like to be my devotee. I come as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And then, as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he also has full awareness of all the principles of bhakti and teaches them also. But when he's Krishna, or Narayan, or Ramachandra, or like when he's the Devata, who is the object of devotion, he's not in this mood of what to do to worship me, because he's receiving it. But yeah, as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and so, I mean, that's also the Leela we are in right now, right? Like we are in the furthest wave of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Leela. That's how you can also meditate, how we can connect with Krishna and learn about devotional service. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu taught that chanting of the holy name is the best thing to do in this age, right? So that's why when you're with the Hare Krishnas, they will always chant. And that's what makes us happy. I was also thinking, because we can hear this and we can be like, yeah, Durvasa, he really like, der hat den Vogel abgeschossen, I don't know how to say it in English, like, he did like the craziest thing that you can imagine. I'm not like him, you know, I'm more like Ambarish. Or we can also say, oh, Ambarish was so great and I'm horrible. But actually I think the point of when we hear these stories is to think about, hey, I have a little Durvasa and a little Ambarish in me. Like we have the potential to be this or that, and to kind of tune into more the Ambarish Maharaj side in us. And I wanted to ask you, what do you think is a typical Durvasa Muni behavior? Let's say someone joins the devotees. What are the kind of mistakes we would have to be careful not to make if we don't want to follow in the footsteps of Durvasa's mistake? And what could be, like, if we think that the goal of Krishna, like of ISKCON, is to have power and knowledge, what are some of the mistakes we could do?
Feeling threatened.
Can you say it?
Feeling threatened by a devotee, for example, who, like, they have a talent or something that you, like, think is a talent, and you just envy them for that, and you kind of feel jealous about that. So in effect, you want you to almost like have what they have.
I'll just repeat, because I think maybe in the back they didn't hear. But he said, so one example of the following Durvasa's mistake would be when we feel threatened, when someone else has like a talent or is good at something, that we feel like, oh, why does this person have to be so good at this? I wish someone would, I wish something bad would happen so that they're not this good, it's disturbing me. Yeah, that we're like envious, right? Yeah. Something else? What else? What are the kind of mistakes that...
Yeah, if you, for example, see some tiny mistake from someone, and we don't see actually what is beyond, what is this about.
I like that, yeah. That we are very judgmental, right? And then when someone does something, oh, that was wrong. And because I think this is actually like when we grow in our spiritual consciousness, then we will become more and more broad-minded. And we will see more and more how everyone is actually part of Krishna's family. And we will not be like, this, like, yeah, we will, yeah.
Like punishing for the small mistake, like giving like big mistake, like punishing, like giving big punishment for the small mistakes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And making others feel really bad about themselves, right? That's the kind of the consequence, like. Something else?
Yeah.
We can look for our own sense of importance, our own gratification, that we are very important and that we should be given lots of respect.
Yeah.
As Durvasa Muni wanted lots of respect.
Mm-hmm.
And that as soon as we are not shown any respect, or even we're shown a level of respect that's less than what we think we deserve, we can get very angry and infuriated by it.
And that's actually the exact opposite of what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu teaches in the Shikshashtakam, right? He says, just think of how you can give respect and love to others, but not about what you're receiving. And I heard this actually interesting concept recently in a podcast. It is called surplus value. So that he said, so the idea is if you give a little bit more, it's actually not a problem. If you leave this world and you gave a little bit more than you got back. And actually you will be happier than if you're the whole time like, you respect me now like this, and you respect me like this, and you did it wrong, and why are you not? Yeah. Because in the end, we cannot control someone else's behavior, right? We can only control our own behavior. And if we try to force others to do something or be someone they're not, I mean, that's a horrible way to live life.
But it could be also be, for example, the devotees want to serve Krishna, and one devotee, for example, eats a boga. Since they are not possible to serve Krishna, then they have actually to be make measurements that it will not happen again.
Yeah.
And they can also be angry, isn't it? Because they cannot offer it to Krishna anymore.
Yeah, of course, there's also transcendental anger. Like, let's say someone intentionally does something to interrupt the seva. And if you then feel like, that's not okay, that actually is transcendental anger. That's anger in the service of Krishna. Because anger is an emotion that teaches us some boundary was crossed. Now, the question is whether or not the boundary was like realistic, like Durvasa Muni's boundary, that I should be like the most important person. It's not a real boundary in that sense, right? It was ego. But if it's a natural like a boundary in the seva that makes sense, like the bogas for Krishna, someone cannot just take it. Yeah. Then it's necessary to instruct people, and I think it depends on how they go. Like if someone makes an honest mistake, then there's no necessity to be angry. You can just say, no, that's not how we do it in the temple. We do it like this or that. But if someone is like it sounded for you, if someone is intentionally trying to disrupt.
Related, but also a bit of a question. In the conversation between Durvasa and Narayan, one of the verses that was quoted that you mentioned was having awakened faith in my glories, knowing that material world is full of suffering, etc. Jata Shuddha Matkatasu from the 11th canto. The recommendation is that for the person who's performing bhakti, for the devotee who's not yet fully on the level of Ambarish Maharaj, we're all somewhere on that spectrum between Durvasa and Ambarish. So if we want to start moving towards being Ambarish Maharaj, the recommendation that's given is to be happy, like to be happy and keep on performing this bhakti, this devotional service. And in that way, like realizing that like eventually we'll get there, eventually we'll get to that level. How do we remain happy in that sense? Like, what does that process of being happy look like? Because when we feel slighted, when we feel like we haven't been given the respect that we're due, when we feel that, someone's insulted us, or these sort of things, like we've been hurt, and so our ego is like crying out for help. How do we then calm the ego and make sure that we remain happy and are able to continue enthusiastically in our devotional service?
I like that point because it's true, without happiness we will not be able to continue. And I think if you could give so many answers to this. I don't know, what came to my mind when you spoke was, I think it depends, like let's say we feel some pain because we didn't get what we wanted or didn't get the respect we thought we deserved. I think one question we can ask ourselves, is this happening chronically? Is someone chronically being almost like abusive almost to me, like emotionally? Because then it's a different thing. Like if you have someone in your life who's always just mistreating you, it's not a situation, like you cannot always go, oh, I'll be humble, I'll just let them talk to me like this, it's all okay. Then you have to kind of also say something or set a boundary or maybe leave that association. And so that's one side, like the kind of chronic situation you're in. And then the other thing is, if something happens once or twice and it's not like a core thing in your life, to then not become really disturbed because let's say someone in traffic took the road before you, but actually it was your turn to drive or something, and then be like, oh, this. Then it's more a question of, let me just understand, like, then it's more a question of reflecting on the ego. Because the ego wants to be separate from Krishna and devotees and kind of like stand on your own, like spectacular in that sense. And so if it's like that, if the pain is more like that I'm not like the most important person right now, or I wasn't respected the way I think I should be respected, then it's more an internal thing. Then it's not like going outside and setting a boundary. Then it's more an internal thing of letting go of that desire of the ego. I always like to think also that maybe this is Krishna directing us. Like, let's say we don't get a service that we really wanted or something. Then maybe Krishna doesn't want you to do the service. Maybe he wants you to direct your attention onto something else. To kind of also see what is maybe Krishna's arrangement in this. Those are some thoughts on happiness, but I guess we could keep talking about happiness forever. I think it's a combination of setting up your life in a way that like your core emotional needs can be met, and then also letting go of extra stuff that's not a core emotional need. Like it is a core emotional need to be loved. We all need to be loved, right? And if you have a life where you're not loved, then it's not an ego thing. That's actually a core emotional need that's not being met. But if that need is met, and then there are lots of situations where you feel like, oh, this person is not respecting me, or not why doesn't this person see how talented I am or how great I am, then that could be ego. Because the ego thinks we will be happy by climbing to the top, when actually we will be happy by relaxing into the bottom. Because that's where Krishna is. That's where Nityananda's mercy is. You don't have to convince Krishna that you're good. You're already good. And you can relax into knowing that he knows that. I also have some thoughts about this Durvasa Muni. Maybe I'll just add what you've already all shared. So sometimes, we might also think that we have to now punish a devotee, kind of. Like, because that's what Durvasa Muni was doing. And maybe you can think about maybe subtle things you sometimes do to punish devotee, like just not talking to that devotee anymore. I mean, I don't know how it is in your marriages, but that's a common thing to happen, right? I've heard of it. Or when we maybe discuss and fight how something is to be judged. Is it like this or that? And it's really, is it really that important? Because in the moment where you discuss like who's right, it always kind of hurts the relationship level. Because people will then feel like, who are you to tell me the truth? Who are you to control me? Why can I not have my own opinion? Give me some space, right? So it's also important not to forget when you're interacting with devotees that the relationship is actually the most important thing, or one important thing. Of course, truth is also important, but sometimes we can really hurt our relationships by always wanting to be right and kind of discussing instead of just saying, okay, let's agree to disagree, or you see it like this, I see it like that, that's fine. I mean, there's not, it's like in the scriptures, there are so many examples where someone says something, and then, or like Chaitanya Prabhu says something, and then he says the opposite. Then he says the opposite of that, then the opposite of that. And he wants to show us with that, hey, there's so many ways of seeing the truth. You can relax if someone has maybe a slightly different version on Krishna than you. Or if we don't really, I think also what Durvasa Muni had a difficulty with is trying to understand Ambari's situation. He didn't really try to see what was his situation. He just judged immediately. So we can also really avoid going into this direction by thinking, why is maybe the person acting the way they're acting? What is maybe their intention? Because often people have a good intention, but they're not that good at getting it across. And it might seem like they're doing something that's stupid, but actually they're really trying to do a good thing. Not always, but often. And when we try to see, well, try to have some empathy, why is this person maybe acting like that? Maybe they're trying to please the Lord. Because that's what Krishna is interested in, and that's what he will see. He will not see, oh, my devotee did it wrong. The devotee, like there's this instance where a devotee wanted to give Krishna a banana, but the devotee was so in ecstasy he gave him accidentally the peel, but Krishna didn't care, right? And if you're now coming, oh, you're such a, how can you dare to give him the peel? What's wrong with you? Krishna will be like, this devotee's in ecstasy, that's the goal. I don't care about the banana, right? So we have to be careful not to be in that judgmental mood. That's focused on externals in the end, right? Because the externals isn't what it's about. And of course, also one lesson is to kind of get out of the me and mine thinking. Like Durvasa was only thinking about his own ego and his own rights and what he wanted or didn't want. And that's the way we were just talking about happiness. It's not really a happy life. You will always be happier if you include others in your life, if your life is bigger than you, right? And at best including Krishna. I just heard actually something nice of Bhakti Vigyan Maharaj. He said, Krishna shouldn't be the context of your life. Meditate that you are in the context of Krishna, or you are the context of the holy name. So that's like, if you look at that, the world becomes so much bigger.
Yeah, and I think all of the examples that you gave show that we should never like lose the focus for the main thing. We're all like trying to serve and please Krishna, and if we're doing some minor mistakes, just the banana example that you just gave, that's not like take a step back and say, okay, he's in ecstasy, he tries to serve. And I think in the beginning you always also talked about samadashana, and I think this empathy is also, I think something that you can connect with that. If you like see, okay, maybe this devotee is doing this or that mistake, maybe I was also in a situation where I did something like that, and how would I have felt would be like treated like chastised for this mistake. I was also trying to do my best, so I think that's also part of samadashana in this context.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, definitely. Trying to see. Maybe I was also in that same position, and now this devotee is trying their best. And then one other thing I wrote down is anger makes you blind. So if you're angry, take a walk around the block. Take some big deep breaths and then decide what you want to do, right? Actually, that's also scientific, because when we're angry, like this front part of our brain just shuts off, and that's the part we need to think clearly. We're like in the back, which is like the reptilian brain. And then we will just act on the ego, or on like when we're threatened and protective. So when you're angry, better to first calm down before you decide what you want to say or do. Because he did it out of anger, right? Durvasa just was like an angry reaction. I had one
can I give a comment to the last question also?
Yeah.
Theoretically, is this of course very much easy and to follow this thought. But if I'm angry, then I don't think about this.
You have to practice thinking about it. That's all I can say to that, you know. All you can do is, and if is reflect. Oh, I was angry again. That's why it went wrong. And then, the more you reflect, the more you will gain awareness earlier and earlier in the process. Then the next time you will maybe notice that you're speaking out of anger while you're speaking in anger, and then the next time you will notice that you're angry before, and then you're there. You can, you know, it's just a matter of keeping it in your awareness and practicing. And while you were asking a question, the last thought that I had, or just came to my mind again, I also like how Dharvasa was all about knowledge, whereas actually Bhakti is about love, right? So that's also something whenever you're practicing, to really see, am I feeling it? Like, am I just cognitively there? Because Bhakti is not a cognitive thing. Like, chanting the beads is not about concentration in the end, it's about feeling. And listening to a class is not about knowing all the verses or all the details, it's about feeling it. Or interacting with devotees is not about having all the manners that are written in some book about manners, but it's about feeling the loving exchange and authentically. So to kind of place more emphasis on feeling and developing your feelings rather than on the cognitive part. Because usually we approach everything the way we approached our life before. So if we approach our life before as a cognitive thing, then we can also approach Bhakti as a cognitive thing. But Krishna says, I can only be known by love. That's when he opens the world a little bit and shows you something more. We just stop?
No, you have to say something?
What do we do now?
Actually, still offering is going on. So,
At the back, anybody has questions?
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Maybe I think this the circle of expecting respect and judging someone begins from when you start to get expectation from somebody or something, and then maybe you feel disrespected when the action or somebody have not fulfilled your seekness, what you are seeking, or the expectation you want to be fulfilled.
Yeah. So you're saying that Durvasa's problem started with his expectation.
At maybe one point, maybe he did so much tapasya or something, he was considered as an important embody in the society, so he was naturally expecting people to respect him like others were doing, and this when he was not getting that, he was not feeling so good about it, and he was getting angry or cursing people so easily. My thought.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. I think that summarizes it well, right? Yeah. And we can deduce from that also just think about what are my expectations, and am I frustrated because my expectations were maybe not fitting? Am I really expecting just to serve Krishna, or am I also expecting maybe something for the ego? Because then Krishna often arranges that this becomes aware. Then he will arrange that something happens that we can see that ego aspect. But that's just an opportunity to let go of it. I can tell you the 3 ways we act on ego from psychology. You want to know? Yes. So, one way is when we counterattack. So it's because ego is always that I'm threatened. Like someone said it right in the beginning. Yeah, you said it, feeling threatened. So then counterattacking. So let's say someone does something well, counterattack. I try to do it better, or I try to show a mistake. I will correct that person. So that's counterattacking. Then this is very interesting. The second way that we can act on ego is if we avoid. That means if I'm insecure about something, I would just not go into that situation anymore. And that's really interesting because that's something we might not think as acting on ego, but it actually is. And the problem is that when we avoid things that we're afraid of, the fear just grows. So let's say you're afraid of meeting new people because you have this insecurity that you won't be liked. That is also ego, right? Because ego, if we didn't have that false ego, we would just know, I'm lovable, I'm good, Krishna loves me, everything's fine. So insecurity is always ego. So if I'm afraid of meeting new people, then I just avoid it. I just don't meet any new people. I just stay at home. So that's also acting on ego. That's interesting, right? I think so. So it's not, because usually in the scriptures, we always hear about the counterattack when someone goes and is like, Durvasa Muni was counterattacking, like he was sending this demon to him. But it could also be avoiding. And the third way, they call like surrendering to it. So that's like, if living with whatever false idea you have about yourself. So if you think I'm a horrible person, to just live as though you were a horrible person, although it's not true. So if someone treats you horribly, to think, oh, that's all I deserve. So you like stay in that association instead of looking for a better association where you're uplifted. Or not taking care of yourself, like, oh, I'm not going to shower today, I'm just a horrible person. That would also be in that, that's also acting on ego, right? Because you're identified with that false concept of yourself. So those are the three things we can also avoid.
I'm sorry, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Are we allowed to ask some other questions apart from?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
I am new to Krishna consciousness, but I have one question I've been running in my mind. So, if everything in my life is about Krishna's will, so do I have opportunity or a chance to choose my own path, or everything it has already been decided?
Ah. That's like the free will question, kind of like, and it's a mix of both. So, because Krishna, like he is under the control of his devotees, he also enjoys when his devotees make decisions. So he wants to kind of see what you also want and where you want to go. So it's like a playful dance between you and God, of listening where he inspires you to go, and then he sees what you do with that, and then he inspires the next thing. So it's like a back and forth. You can get inspiration from connecting with him and listening to when you feel, oh, this might be the right step. And then you go that step, and then he will see how you go that step and how you feel, and then he will, so it's like a back and forth. It's both. Because in the end, it's about love. And there are so many different ways to experience love, also for Krishna. And you can have a loving relationship with him in hundreds and millions of ways. Like there's hundreds and millions of ways you could live your life or make your choices. And it's important not to be too afraid of making a mistake. It's better to just keep going, then you learn, right? Rather if we're like sitting like, I'll make a mistake, I don't know where to go right or left, then we're kind of stuck in that place. What's your name? Anura. Nice to meet you.
Anybody at the back? Not spiritual, but some psychological questions.
I will give a spiritual answer anyway.
Hare Krishna.
Yes.
You talked about like how fear of not accepted is also kind of ego.
Mm-hmm.
So how fear and ego is different. Like we can have fear about other things also, right? Fear of getting failed, fear of some darkness. How it is different, how fear and ego is different. And you also mentioned like one of the way of punishing people like who is good is stop talking to them. It's avoidance. So is it not the ego then?
The ego that wants to stop talking?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's ego, right? Yeah, definitely. And the first question of fear, There's that's actually interesting. And there's different kinds of fear. You can have spiritual fear, but also material fear, and it depends on which identity or which self-concept it comes from. So, if you're afraid of something because you're identified with your identity in this world, then it would be fear-based in this world, so it would be materialistic or material fear. And I mean, some of that also makes sense, but because, like, for example, if we would not be afraid of just walking on the street, then we would probably, our body would be finished soon, right? So there's also fear that makes sense. I don't want to say like materialistic fear is always bad or wrong, but of course we can have a lot of anxieties that are unnecessary if we become more Krishna conscious, because then a lot of our fears, actually Vaikuntha means place without fear. So as the more we develop an awareness of our true identity as spiritual, the less anxieties we have in life, because then we know no matter what happens in this life, I will continue existing, and Krishna's taking care of me, and I'm not in a danger. It's like if you're playing a computer game and you lose, you're not threatened, right? You're not scared because you know I can just start a new game. And that's kind of the mood you have if you know that your true identity is eternal. You're not scared of what, so scared, like it's not an existential threat. And then it loses a lot of its like sharpness, the anxiety. And then there's even something like spiritual fear. Like Prabhupada once said, the main problem of my disciple is that they're not afraid of Maya. So that's also like, you can have, some fear can be spiritually protective. Like if you're afraid of maybe doing things that would harm your Krishna consciousness, then that's a good fear, that's a spiritual fear that's keeping you in a good consciousness. So yeah, a lot of fear comes from ego. And the more we shift our identity to I'm happy, I'm Satchidananda, I'm eternal, happy, and full of all knowledge and full of wisdom, then the more the ego fear goes down. Did that answer your question? Yeah.
Just a follow-up question for that. Fear of doing something wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Is it ego or it's just a fear of which? It's a spiritual fear.
Well, it depends what exactly you're afraid of doing wrong. Like if you're afraid...
Fear of hurting someone, fear of putting someone into trouble because of our actions. So
I think that's spiritual, goes into the direction of spiritual. You can, yeah, because if that means you're considering someone else, you have some empathy and compassion. So that's like a spiritual concern.
like why I was asking this question was like when we say if I have fear to if I may hurt someone, it comes back to us, right? I am doing it. I shouldn't do it.
So you mean it because it comes from this consciousness of I'm the doer?
And I am the right person. I shouldn't do something wrong. I have to be right.
Yeah, then it would go into the ego direction if it's more like this. If like I'm afraid of hurting someone because then I will be hurt because my reputation goes down, for example, right? Then it's more ego. I think a lot of the times it's not black and white, because always, there's terms like mixed bhakti, for example. So that means a lot of our intentions, they can be totally mixed up. So if someone does one thing, you cannot just say, this was ego, or this was spiritual. Usually for most of us, it's like all mixed. There's a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And then the goal is to strengthen the spiritual motivation.
Thank you. No questions? You can meet personally maybe. Thank you, Mangala Mataji, for giving such a wonderful class on developing a relationship with the Supreme Lord and how the Lord loves his devotees and devotees love the God. So let us thank her by loudly chanting Hari Bol 3 times. Hari Bol! Hari Bol! Hari Bol! So now we'll have a God Aarti. So I would request everyone to stand up. You can put the cushions on the side so you will not sleep while dancing.